Hello everybody, how are you doing? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review and welcome back to yet another Q&A. So I feel like this is probably the first time since I started the channel that I've done a Q&A in 2 consecutive months. But I thought it would be fun to do because of course this is kind of sort of centered around E3. The previous one I did last month was just a couple of days or maybe a week before E3, and I wanted it to be a pre-E3 prediction sort of discussion and questions from you guys to myself about what we might see at the show. It became the almost all Nintendo show, but it was still a lot of fun. And now that E3 is come and gone, I wanted to do another kind of wrap-up Q&A, hear more questions from you guys, give you guys your shout-outs and do all that, and see what you had to talk to me about and wanted to ask me about now that we've seen everything play out from E3, from Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, Ubisoft, all these different things. And I mean, you know, there's a theme in most of the questions. It's, as per usual, almost all Nintendo. And even more so, I got a lot of Metroid questions, which I absolutely love. I thought that was so cool. Thank you guys so much for asking me those. But I tried to pick a mix of Nintendo stuff, Metroid stuff, some non-Nintendo questions, and do the best I could. As per usual, I will say that if you want to be involved and be a part of the conversation in the Q&As in the future, you can, as always, follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Rule of Two Review, of course, on both of those sites, and keep an eye out for when I do these in the future. But I'm just going to kind of shut up and let's just get started. I had a lot of questions. I picked the best mix I could. Again, you know, sorry if I couldn't get to your question. I get more and more the more often I do these, and I just can't. I mean, I haven't been able to include everyone's questions in quite a while. So either way, let's get started with today's first question. So today's first question on Twitter comes from Andy Lewis at AndrewLewis46. What is up, buddy? Thank you so much for being today's first question of the day. Andy asks me, how many big-name games like Mario and Zelda do you see the Switch getting per year? We have 2 this year. Does that trend continue? So, a good question. I think your numbers might be a little bit skewed. I think it depends on what you're considering big-name games. Yes, we have Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey coming out this year, so you feel like we have 2 big-name Nintendo games coming out this year. That's true, but I would argue that there's even more, depending on what you want to consider big-name Zelda games, big-name Nintendo games. Like, for me, Splatoon is now kind of in that same category. ARMS is a brand new IP. We know we're getting those games. Fire Emblem Warriors, I don't know. I mean, Fire Emblem's one of their big games, but I don't know, because that's a spin-off kind of game, maybe it doesn't count. Regardless, I mean, your question has merit, and I know what you're saying, but I feel like there's more than just the 2 big Nintendo games we're getting this year. But if you break it down to maybe the core essential, I'm one of the people that believes in the big 3 of Nintendo: Mario, Zelda, and Metroid. I do include Metroid in that. I know it doesn't sell as well as series like Fire Emblem and Pokemon and whatnot, but I feel like those 3 series are the 3 today still standing from the original 8-bit absolute first days of Nintendo as a home console maker. Those 3, they still continue. So, you know, you can make that larger, you can cast a wider net, like I said, and Pokemon becomes a part of that, Animal Crossing, Star Fox, all these different things. So, to get to your more direct question, will we see more years like this where we're getting a couple of titles a year? And I do think that's going to happen. I feel like we're going to get between 2 and 3 core Nintendo franchises, at least for probably the first 3 years. I think Nintendo has worked really hard to keep that momentum up, but it's going to be tricky because at some point you'd feel like they're going to run out of games to make. Like, what are they going to do? They're already releasing, like, what, 7 or 8 first-party pretty big franchise games for the Switch this year alone in its launch year. When are they going to run out of games? But I think it depends on how you split up the franchises. Like, for example, we're getting Fire Emblem Warriors this year, but we're getting a true Fire Emblem game next year. And when does Metroid Prime 4 come out? Some people think 2018, some people think 2019. I tend to lean towards 2019. When does Animal Crossing come out? Are we going to get a new Star Fox like some people, myself, even theorize? There's a lot to kind of go on there, but ultimately, I feel like we'll probably see a couple of big Nintendo games per year for the next couple of years, at least through 2019, 2020, and that should only be really exciting. Next question on Twitter comes from Rob at RobWithBeard. So what's up, Rob? Rob with Beard? Sounds a little familiar to me. Anywho, Rob asks me, considering their unwillingness about Smash on Evo, can Nintendo make a bigger impact in esports, and what will it take to move forward? So I chose this question because I don't really have all the answers, but I still have some insight I think that I can add. So you talk about Nintendo's unwillingness about Smash at Evo, or to have Smash at Evo. I may be confused here, and you guys who follow the esports and the Evo kind of scene better than I do, because I don't really follow it at all. I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, Smash Brothers was a part of that, wasn't it? I thought that Melee has been a part of Evo for a long time, and even maybe last year might have been the first year where even Smash for Wii U got included. I could be really wrong on that, guys, so don't crucify me if that's the case. But in my memory, I thought that that's how it worked out. But regardless, let's remove the Smash Brothers and the Evo conversation and talk about the second part of your question on if Nintendo can make a bigger impact in esports. I want to say yes, because I feel like that's a huge part of what they're trying to do with the Switch, and I think it's nothing but a great thing. Even though I don't really care about it or follow it, I think it's a very smart business move for them to maybe get involved with that, because you get a lot of recognition, you get a lot of visibility, and a huge swath of the gaming market that Nintendo has previously not paid too much attention to or really cared about or even catered to. And when you have games like the Smash Brothers and the ARMS and the Splatoons of the world, you can start to take those things into that esports arena, which I know is huge. I mean, people who win these competitions are winning, what, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars? I think that that's correct. Maybe I'm overshooting it, but I thought that the biggest prizes available can sometimes get that big. But regardless, it's a big deal. It shows up on major networks, and people follow it like crazy. And I think that Nintendo realized that they could start to capitalize on this because they make amazing multiplayer competitive games. Granted, they're not making Call of Duties and Halos and first-person shooter kind of competitive things, which is mostly what you see in the esports arena. But they do make fighting games, which is huge in Evo, and they make other games that are just simply great for competitive stuff. And so, yes, I feel like we're going to see a bigger and bigger push from Nintendo to kind of get into the esports scene. Next question on Twitter comes from somebody pretty cool. It comes from the YouTube channel Nintendo Talk, run by a fellow named Patrick. Really cool dude, you know, really new channel on YouTube, but is doing pretty well for himself, I'd say. You know, we talked on Facebook a couple months ago. He asked me for, like, some advice and stuff. I might have told that story before, but regardless, Nintendo Talk's a really cool channel. Please check it out. And Patrick, what's up, buddy? Thanks for the question. He asks me, hey, Rob, any big plans or projects in the future for Rule of Two review? So that's kind of a big question, because the short answer is yes. I'm planning a couple of things and looking at doing a few changes over the course of the next probably few months. I want to roll it out slowly, because if you do it too quickly, people freak out and they unsubscribe and they leave you, and I don't really want that to happen. And I even have planned on making a video where I was going to touch base with you guys and make it just about me talking about the channel. But the quick version is there's a couple of things I want to do differently. The big thing is I want to start talking about Star Wars more often, because Star Wars is like my favorite thing. And when I first started Rule of Two Review, it was supposed to be about movies and gaming and Nintendo. And as it became a YouTube thing and got bigger and bigger, I sort of just got more interested in talking about Nintendo. So that's now what my audience knows and expects. And that's great, because I love it. But I want to bring the Star Wars convo and the movie convo back in very, very slowly and only occasionally. I thought about changing where I film. You know, maybe I want to move locations or do different locations every once in a while, or maybe set it up in a place where I could stand as opposed to be sitting in my chair at my computer desk. I mean, all sorts of different things. So I mean, those are some quick ideas. I definitely want to do some other things. I even thought about starting a Star Wars podcast, specifically on iTunes, not to put on YouTube, but just to kind of do that. And I used to do that way back in the day, before I got on YouTube, and I've wanted to bring that back again. And I always want to talk Star Wars to the internet, but I don't really do it anymore, because you guys know me for Nintendo stuff. So either way, those are some of the things I'm thinking about doing, but nothing is going to be implemented for probably a couple of months still. But either way, thank you so much, Patrick, for the question. Next question on Twitter comes from Mason at xkariu. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Mason asks me, when do you expect a new Switch to release, and what do you think it will be? Also, are you a believer of the PS5 launching in 2018? So 2 questions there. To the first one, I think it depends on what you mean by a new Switch. There's a couple of ways that could play out. One of them is just an upgraded version of the current Switch. That relates to a later question, so I won't go into that part. As far as a successor to the Switch, I feel like we might see Nintendo's next console that is the successor to what the Switch is right now in 2021, probably 2022 is what I'm going to say. They're probably going to try to make it last a straight solid 5 years. And I think by 2022, their next console will come out. But then the question is it another, you know, console portable hybrid thing? Or is it something totally different, more of a traditional console? Who really knows? if we're looking at something that's a direct successor to the Switch, I think that that's when we're going to probably see it, 2022. But Nintendo does crazy things that might totally change that up, so that's a really hard thing to guess on. As far as the PS5 launching in 2018, no way. I don't know if that's a rumor or something people talk about on the internet. I haven't personally heard that, and if I did, I would shoot that down immediately. There is no way that Sony is releasing a PS5 next year, not when they just released the PS4 Pro. 2019, just 1 year later, becomes a little bit more believable to me with how Microsoft is releasing the One X. And to be fair, we're in a situation where the generation walls obviously don't really exist. The way the Switch released, the way the PS4 Pro released, the way the Xbox One X is going to release, we're all over the place. So these things are harder and harder to predict, but I just don't feel like the PS5 is going to be next year, man. There's no way. 2019 maybe, but not 2018. Okay, next question comes from Brandy Chandler at Fire Emblem 21. What is up, Brandy? Thank you for the question. She asks, Sony question, do you think all the early 2018 games will make early 2018? So, you know, we had a lot of games shown at E3 for PlayStation that looked great. I'm really excited for pretty much everything that they had at their conference, but most of them were 2018 titles. And some of them were early 2018, and we all know Sony's propensity for delays and games releasing way in the future. I think a couple of those games will stick. I mean, what are 2018 games for the PlayStation? You know, God of War is a big one. I think Detroit is a 2018 game. We know Spider-Man's a 2018 game. I think Days Gone is a 2018 game. I didn't double check these dates, but I'm pretty sure almost everything that they showed was 2018. I feel like some games are probably going to slip and be farther, like Detroit, for example. But I think other games, I feel like God of War is going to be the one that sticks, because that's a huge game. So you might think that's the first game that would get delayed. I feel like Sony knows they absolutely cannot delay that game, because they haven't had a big tentpole game in quite a while that's exclusive. God of War is going to be a huge release for them. I am crazy excited for it. It looks fantastic. And I think that right now, you know, Q1 2018, it sucks we have to wait that long for any decent games for the PS4 right now. But I feel like the first quarter of 2018, which is like 6, 7, 8 months from now, if they get that huge game out in that window, I think they're in pretty good shape. And I think that they know they can't delay that game. So I feel like we're going to be able to count on God of War. Everything else, man, I don't even know. And some of those games might even be 2017. Maybe they get delayed to 2018. Other games are probably going to be the end of 2018. I love Sony. I love their games. I'm very excited for them, but they are really bad at release dates. Okay, next question. Last Twitter question before we move on to some Facebook questions and then come back to Twitter. So this question comes from SJohn78 at SmileyJohn78. What is up, John? Thanks for the question. He says, hey, Rob, do you think we will get the Metroid Prime Trilogy? The Metroid Prime Trilogy on the Switch. Although that'd be a funny way to name this, a Switch version. The Metroid Prime Swilogy. It's not a good name, Nintendo. Do not do that. Do you think we'll get the Metroid Prime Trilogy? I did it again! Trilogy on the Switch via Virtual Console or as a port? Thanks, great channel. I should probably make that an outtake, but I'm not. I'm just going to keep going with it. So, yes, I've been thinking about this ever since all the Metroid stuff from E3. A lot of people asked me this question, and John, yours is the one that I picked. Are we going to get a Metroid Prime Trilogy on the Switch? I think that yes. And there's a few reasons why I think that's going to happen. The biggest one is because I am a believer in the 2019 release date for Metroid Prime 4. I think 2018 isn't impossible, so please understand, I'm not saying 2018 is impossible, but I feel like it's going to be a Q1 2019 release, because I think Nintendo's starting to realize that Q1 in that summertime, quarters 1 and 2, which typically no one releases big games in, I think Nintendo wants to start taking advantage of that. And this year is a prime example with the Switch and Breath of the Wild itself coming out in Q1 in March. And then they've got a couple of big first-party games coming out throughout the summer with Splatoon and ARMS. I mean, that's... And then Mario vs. Rabbids, Mario plus Rabbids is August, I believe. So that's technically a summer month as well. So they're really, really showing that they're willing to tap into these untapped markets of time frame. So I could see them taking this next mammoth game. Metroid Prime 4 is going to be so huge for Nintendo. And I could see them saying, let's bypass the holiday rush, and just a couple of months later, let's take advantage of this February, March, April time frame and throw this huge tentpole Metroid Prime 4 game in that period, and it'll have that whole time almost just to itself. and it's going to be fantastic because we're going to be waiting for it. And they've done that before. I believe Mario Sunshine and Wind Waker on the GameCube also both released in that kind of time frame as well. So Nintendo's not averse to it. That's when I feel we're going to see Prime 4. And through that, I think that to help us have some sort of Metroid action in 2018, because we know Samus Returns is coming out this year, I think that might be when they want to release the Prime Trilogy on the Switch to give us something to kind of feed our Metroid appetites in 2018. And that game is probably smart for them to release to prepare people for Prime 4. To all these players, all these young guys and girls, or all these other players who just never played those games or were too young to play them, but they want to be excited for Prime 4. I've talked about this. A lot of people in my comments are telling me they're picking these games up and playing them now because they never did. And it's like, well, Nintendo should jump on that sooner than later and just make a trilogy release on the Switch and sell that and make crazy amounts of money. I'd love to see it upgraded visually. I'd love to see them offer a couple of different ways to control. And honestly, we don't know how Prime 4 is going to control. Is it going to use the motion pointer control? Or is it going to use regular standard controls with the Pro Controller, or both? If they're smart, they'll do both. And I think if they incorporate all those control schemes into the Trilogy version, people can get used to how they want to control Prime 4 once it finally releases in what I think will be 2019. So, great question. I have a lot more on that I could say, but I don't want to take up too much more time on this one question. But that's my answer. I think Prime 4 is 2019, and I think, yes, very good chance that Nintendo does very smartly release the Prime Trilogy in some fashion. Whether it's a remaster or just a virtual console release, they're going to release the Prime Trilogy, I think, on the Switch. Alright, next we're going to move on to Facebook. This question comes from Jeff Edmonds. What's up, Jeff? Thanks for the Facebook question. He asks, do you think that Nintendo will start porting or remastering games from the Wii/Wii U, like the Xbox One/PS4 has been doing since they launched, or will it be few and far between? So, I mean, it's tough because we've already kind of seen that happen, right? I mean, we have Mario Kart and we have Pokken Tournament that are Wii U games that are being ported over and remastered for the Switch. And obviously everyone and their mom thinks that Smash Brothers is going to come as well. I'm not as sold on that idea, but I do also see it as possible as well. So, I mean, we'll just pretend that Smash is going to come as well. There was even rumors about Xenoblade, but obviously we're getting Xenoblade 2 instead. So, you know, Nintendo's already started doing that. The question to me becomes, would they start doing it more often? Are we going to see more games? Are we going to see Smash? Are we going to see Skyward Sword? Stuff like that. And it's tough because I don't really know that I can say one way or the other. I mean, I never thought they would have remastered Twilight Princess, but they brought that to the Wii U. I mean, Wind Waker was a huge shock, right? Even doing the Metroid Prime Trilogy in and of itself was a huge thing to do, because that's 2 previous gen games. So, you know, Nintendo has shown, it's like my gut reaction is like, well, no, Nintendo wouldn't do that because they don't do that very often. But then I start listing off all those games I just said, and it's like they actually have been doing that for a while. They brought Resident Evil 4 to the Wii from the GameCube. I mean, there's so many instances where Nintendo has done that. It's hard for me to say they won't continue to do it. But I also feel like they might not want to rely too much, with the Switch specifically, they might not want to rely too much more than they already have with Mario Kart and Pokken, and we'll pretend Smash is in there. Maybe they cut it off at those 2 or 3 games and that's all we ever get. So I don't know that I could see it being a consistent thing. You know, I think we might just see virtual console stuff for GameCube games. I just talked about the Trilogy, the Prime Trilogy. That could be a virtual console or a remaster. So I don't know. Basically, Nintendo is not opposed to it, obviously. I think we may see some more, but I think we also may see them cut it off pretty soon. After maybe Smash, they may just say they're done with it. So it'll be really interesting to see how Nintendo treats it going forward. Okay, next question comes from Matthew John Daniel Welch. Matthew asks me, with how PlayStation structured their conference, do you think it would have been better as a pre-recorded event like the Spotlight? And do you think Nintendo announced Metroid Prime 4 early, in case people would be upset if all we got was a 3DS remake of Metroid 2? Keep up the videos. Thanks for answering my question last Q&A. Oh, well, hey, I'm glad I could answer your question last time. And 2 really, really good questions. I noticed with Facebook that happens a lot. People sneak multiple questions into one question. So, I talked about the PlayStation thing, and I talked about this with PlayStation and Bethesda, actually, at E3. Yes, I think we're seeing some signs of some companies start to move towards what Nintendo has already put in place with their digital events and the Spotlight this year, where it's a pre-recorded thing that just gives us a bunch of games and a presentation, and that's it. Just release it to the internet. No need to do a press conference in a room. And I think that Bethesda obviously did that. And I think that Sony, not enough people were talking about the fact that, yeah, I think Sony kind of did the same thing too. I mean, Sean Layden came on stage 2 times, literally, just to introduce the reel of trailers, and then once to introduce the final game, Spider-Man. And so I was like, dude, this basically is just a digital event, a digital direct, only with people in a room watching it on a screen as opposed to at home watching it on their computers. So I feel like, honestly, Sony and Bethesda probably should have just done that. They didn't need to have a live thing. I think they're wasting people's time by doing it. And I think that over the course of the next few years, we might finally see one of these companies, even Microsoft, might eventually say, we're not doing it live. We're going to release our package of trailers and information as one video program, and we're just going to put it up on YouTube and on the internet at this time. And enjoy. There you go. I think that might eventually happen. As far as Metroid, yes, I absolutely love what you say, and I do think that's true. I went back and thought about this as well. You ask if they announced Metroid Prime 4 specifically at this E3 so early, because if they just had Samus Returns, people might still have been upset. And sadly, I think that's true. Yes, I think people would have still been mad that the Metroid game we got would have been just another 3DS game, even though it looks spectacular and it's everything so many true Metroid fans have wanted. And I would have been over the moon if we got just Samus Returns. Absolutely, I would have been very happy. But I think Nintendo knew, and this is something where the fan outcry, I think, did influence them making this decision, and the reception to Federation Force did influence them to make this decision. They were like, you know what? We're making Metroid Prime 4 anyway. We typically don't want to show something without gameplay, but this is an instance where if we want to not only fight back the negative reception, but also create positivity, Nintendo, God, I wish you realized how often you could do this. If we want to also create that positivity, we need to just let them know, hey, we're also making a console new Metroid game, and it happens to be Prime 4. You're welcome. And I think that, yes, absolutely, you are onto something there. I do believe that's why they did that. And I have to say, it was a very, very smart move. Okay, next question on Facebook is a big question, and this fellow asked a lot of questions, a lot of very long questions, so thank you so much for asking so many. But I ultimately had to pick one for the Q&A. I will say there was another question asked that I might make a whole video on just on that one question. So this question comes to us from Patrick Toe on Facebook. Patrick asks me, he said, you asked for questions, so here's a whole load of them that came to mind. And this is the one I wanted to choose today. One of the things that helped make the original Metroid Prime trilogy so special was that they were a collaborative effort between Nintendo of Japan and the Texas-based Retro Studios, East meets West, not just geographically, but in terms of game design philosophies. Given that we know Retro isn't behind Prime 4, do you think it might feel like something would be missing from some of the Western influence in the game's development? If Nintendo are developing the game internally in Japan without any outside involvement from a Western studio like Retro, how might that impact the game's overall style and design as compared to Primes 1 through 3? Could a younger Japanese development team possibly balance this out? Whew! All right. Awesome question. Very well formulated. Thank you so much. I love smart, well-asked questions. That just makes me so happy. And it's about Metroid, so I get really excited. So, you know, the gist of the question is, with the first Prime games, with the trilogy specifically, you had Nintendo of Japan and Retro, which is a Western developer, working together to make these games. And now we know Retro isn't making Metroid Prime 4. It might be some Japanese studio. Is it going to still feel as good as those original games? That's the gist of the question. And, you know, I'm playing the optimist here, and yeah, I absolutely believe in this team that's behind Metroid Prime 4, and I believe they're going to make a good game. And, you know, with most things, there's many reasons why I believe that. One is I believe they confirmed that, yes, it's a new studio, or a new team that's actually making this game, but I think that they confirmed some of the original folks that worked on the Prime games are a part of this team, as well as Kensuke Tanabe is also still working with and either producing or directing the game like he did with the original games as well. So you have a couple of people who did work on those games still working on Prime 4. So I think that's going to help this game feel feel like a natural evolution over the original Prime trilogy. And also the fact that it's still Nintendo. It's Nintendo made the Prime trilogy, and Nintendo's making Prime 4 regardless of the team. I think that we're going to see a couple of fundamental things that probably will feel and look a little bit different because the actual Texas-based retro is not behind the game. Yes, that is true. We should expect that, and I'm prepared for that. But I feel like a good game designer, and I say this as somebody who doesn't make games, but, you know, I've been playing games for 30 years, so I feel like I can say this. A good game designer and a good development team could look at something in this situation, could look at previous games that they're building off of, like Primes 1, 2, and 3, and say, we understand these games. We understand why they worked. We know what they did to make them look the way they do, and feel the way they do, and play the way they do, and sound the way they do. A huge element will be sound and music, you guys. So we understand what makes these games good. And we're talented developers, so we can draw the proper inspiration and take the correct beats of development from these games that we experienced and know, and incorporate them and evolve them into a newer version and a sequel on a much more capable machine. The Switch, as I said before, 3 console generations removed from the GameCube Metroid Prime 1 and 2. And that's a big deal. And so it's because I want to believe in Nintendo and believe in the team that they assembled to know how to take the best qualities of those first games and include them into Prime 4, but still evolve it, because a sequel still needs to evolve, not just be a carbon copy, and evolve it into the next natural step in this series, in this now quadrilogy, which blows my mind that we're getting Part 4. So, you know, it's a really good question, and I like diving deep into that, so I have to thank you for it. And ultimately, that's how I feel. I think that we can trust Nintendo and Tanabe to make a really good Metroid Prime 4. Okay, next Facebook question comes to us from Craig Whitney. Craig asks me, "Hi Rob, do you think the rising popularity of 4K televisions over the next couple of years is going to affect the Nintendo Switch sales? And do you expect a Nintendo Switch Pro, quote unquote, in a couple of years to come from Nintendo in the same way Microsoft and Sony have upgraded their consoles? Thanks, and keep up the good work on your channel." So, I like this question. I like this question quite a bit. So, do I think the rise in popularity of 4K televisions is going to affect Nintendo Switch sales? No, not yet. I think we're still a couple of years away. Maybe by the next full console generation where we have Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo's actual successors all three on the market at the same time. When that's happening, I think 4K will be making a really big impact, and it'll be up to Nintendo if they want to find a way to work with that and tap into that market and take advantage of it. And I think that by that, you know, early to mid 2020s is probably when that's going to be happening, and hopefully Nintendo makes good decisions there. But right now, with the Switch currently in 2017, I don't think that the 4K thing is going to affect Nintendo too much, because it's not really helping. I don't think it's really helping Sony, and I don't know if it's going to help Microsoft. Maybe, maybe not. We'll have to see there. Now, as far as a Nintendo Switch Pro, this conversation goes back to, gosh, I think even before the Switch launched, people started to say, ooh, one of the cool things about the Switch is maybe they could upgrade it by just making a new tablet every couple of years. And just like a cell phone, or just like the PS4 Pro and the 1X, it can just be upgraded every couple of years. And I don't think that that's crazy. I mean, it's weird. It's weird when you think about this with Nintendo. I don't think that that is an absolutely absurd thing to think or talk about. However, I still don't ultimately think that I buy it. My gut instinct is that no, I don't think Nintendo would do that. I really feel like, going back to the question earlier, we more than likely would see a successor to the Switch, whether it's a Switch 2 or whether it's a brand new, nothing Switch related, just regular home console. I think we're going to see that in around 2022 or so, about a 5-year lifespan for the Switch, and that's it. You know, and there's even discussions of even an upgraded dock. Some people are saying, ooh, a 4K dock might be coming. And it's like, I mean, I don't understand tech stuff like a lot of you guys know. Is that even possible? I mean, I know that it can make some things run like in a slightly better frame rate and slightly better resolution, but to go from 1080 all the way to 4K, I feel like that's a mammoth jump. And maybe it's possible in the dock, but I feel like it wouldn't be. I mean, I don't know. So that's a really weird rumor that I just don't see happening. So you never know. I could be wrong on this stuff. I'm not a 4K expert. I'm not a technical specs expert either, but I can just give you my gut reaction, which is I don't expect a Switch Pro, and I don't expect 4K to impact the Switch currently at all. Okay, next Facebook question comes from Louis Jenkins. Lewis asks me, do you think Prime 4 and Samus Returns will be followed up by a sequel to Fusion? What do you think the plot of that game would be? I love this question, you guys. This is another one where I was like, ooh, I could make a whole video just on this, but I've made enough Metroid videos. As I said, I wanted to take a break before I make a Metroid-specific video for at least a couple of weeks because I've been spamming you guys with it. But I do want to answer this question. So, there's kind of like two sort of timelines in the Metroid universe, in the Metroid canon, the way we know it. They sort of are the same timeline, and they've also sort of been spoken about in the past as different timelines. I like to think of them as one, but you've got two real sort of paths happening in Metroid. You've got the Prime series and the Prime games, which is Primes 1, 2, and 3. Then, of course, you throw in, like, Hunters and Federation Force, and I guess Prime Pinball into that as well. And then you've got the other Metroid games, the numbered Metroid games, which is Metroid, Metroid 2, Super Metroid, also known as Metroid 3, and Metroid Fusion, also known as Metroid 4. And I feel like since the Metroid we're getting on our current console is Metroid Prime 4, which as I said during E3, I did not expect the next console Metroid game to be a Prime game. I thought Prime was done. I thought it would be a totally different game. Oh, and I'm sorry, over here we go back to the numbers. Other M is included in this. Other M isn't technically numbered, but it's kind of 3.5 because you go Metroid, Metroid 2, Super Metroid, Other M, then Fusion. So there's five games in that timeline, even though Other M was never given a number, and they technically couldn't because the game that takes place after Other M is Fusion, which has already been labeled Metroid 4. So the only number you could put to Prime is 3.5. Anyway, point is, you've got those two timelines, and I feel like since the next game we're getting on the console is Prime 4, and they're dealing with the Prime series and they're just moving forward over there, I think, yes, eventually Nintendo is going to go back to this series over here, to these games, and I think that they're going to make another game that I think would probably, just like you say, Lewis, would be a sequel to Fusion. I think that they would make, and that is exciting because suddenly we have Metroid 5. And I know there'd be 6 games in this little timeline, but it would be Metroid 5. And I kind of, before Prime 4 was announced, I sort of wanted that more than I wanted Prime 4. But now that we're getting Prime 4, I'm just so excited I wouldn't even want to pick one or the other. Anyway, to stay focused on your question, it's a good question. And I like that you're thinking that way, because I think people aren't thinking about the two Metroid timeline kind of thing right now. People aren't really focused on that, but it's an important thing to think about, because these two Metroid games show us Nintendo is dedicated to Metroid and to Samus. So I feel like once these games come out, I don't think we're going to go through another drought of Metroid games. I think Nintendo realized we can't do that again. And I think Samus Returns and Prime 4 are going to be big hits and very successful. So they're going to be like, yep, we got to keep this Samus train rolling. So as soon as Prime 4 releases, I think they're going to be working on another Metroid game. And yes, I think there is a good chance it becomes a sequel to Fusion and we truly get Metroid 5. Alrighty, last Facebook question before we finish off with just a few Twitter questions. And big surprise here, it's a Metroid question. So, this comes from Malik Carson. What's up, Malik? Thanks so much for the question, man. He says, do you think Metroid Prime as we know it will be good enough to sell like one of Nintendo's heavy hitters, or does the series need something like online multiplayer to get people's attention? I should have just made this a Metroid Q&A, you guys. I might actually have to do that later, even though I've talked about so much Metroid stuff here. Yes, I do think Metroid has the ability to sell like one of Nintendo's heavy hitters. That's a big conversation because in the past, Metroid has been one of their big sellers, but most recently, over the last handful of years and handful of releases, it has not been as big of a seller. And so people talk about, oh, Metroid doesn't sell like Pokemon and Mario Kart and stuff, and that's very true. It doesn't, or even Zelda. It's very true. But, as I've said a couple of times already, I think that Metroid Prime 4 and Metroid Samus Returns in today's current market, in this Nintendo climate where we've been so excited for these games, I think they are both going to be huge sellers. I think any Nintendo first-party game put on the Switch right now is going to be a huge seller, and Prime 4 is a game we've been asking for forever. So, I think these games are going to kind of retroactively fix the whole Metroid doesn't sell very well kind of issue, and I think they're going to be really big games. Now, does it need something like online multiplayer to get people's attention? That's a tricky one because I think the answer is yes and no. I think it really just depends on how Metroid Prime 4 specifically looks. how it's marketed and sold to us. I'm someone who, I welcome the online multiplayer thing, but I don't necessarily need or want it. I'm good with just a typical, regular old, huge solo adventure Prime game. That's really all I need or want out of it, and I think that that's where Metroid is best. But there's an opportunity for Nintendo to include some multiplayer stuff and some online stuff. I think that they could do a good job and make it really good, and as long as it doesn't take away from the development or quality of the single-player stuff, it wouldn't bother me, and I would only hope to be surprised. And I think Nintendo could sell this game without the need for it, but I think if they included it and really made it robust, that yeah, they probably could market that as a huge reason for people, even for non-Metroid fans, to want to pick it up, because you might be able to get some sort of first-person competitive shooting experience on the Wii, oh my god, on the Switch, and we know we're not getting Call of Duty, so like maybe Nintendo could really take advantage of the way Metroid plays and make it that kind of game on the console. So yeah, I think that Nintendo could take advantage of that, but I don't think that it necessarily needs it to make it a big seller. Alrighty guys, a few more questions on Twitter and we're going to wrap this up. So back to Twitter from Tiago Martins at Don Guerrero 55. Hopefully I said that right. He asks me, do you think that we will get Virtual Console on Switch, or will they only release the SNES Mini? I'll be mad. So yeah, I've actually been thinking about talking about this as well. So I think that right now, the reason we're still not hearing about the Virtual Console is because of the SNES Mini. So I think you're onto something there. I think that yes, we're going to get the Virtual Console. Nintendo's basically, they've confirmed it, they've talked about it, they know that it's something that we want, and it's something they can make a lot of money on. But you've got two factors, I think, making Nintendo hold off for now. One is, let's get this, 3 or 4 month run of the SNES Mini out and behind us. Let's make it a temporary thing. Let's get all the money and revenue we can from that. Let's get the hype going. People pick those up and everything's great. And let's also launch this weird, the service that they're including with their online service where you can sort of get NES games and stuff for, whatever that's going to be. Let's get that thing rolling. But once those things are understood and they're out there and people have access to them, I think that's when Nintendo's going to say, hey, and now the Virtual Console launches and you can just straight up buy games for $4, $5, $10 at a time and you own these games on your Switch. I think at that point, that's when they're going to do it. But I think initially they don't want the SNES Mini and the online service or the Virtual Console to all sort of cannibalize each other and eat into the same market because they all are the same market. So I think once we get to the SNES Mini and that stuff, that's when we're probably going to hear about the Virtual Console. Okay, next question comes from Traykov540 at Traykov540. What is up, buddy? I know I've answered many questions from Traykov in the past. You always ask really good questions, so thanks so much for being a part of this pretty much almost every time. I do appreciate that. So, Traykov asks me, since it has been confirmed that Retro Studios is not making Metroid Prime 4, what do you think they are working on right now? I got this question a lot as well. Many people asked me this, so everyone's really curious about Retro Studios, myself included. So, I mean, there's obviously two answers everyone thinks of. They're either working on a new IP, or they're working on another Nintendo franchise. So part of me wants to say that I think they're working on a new IP, and there's a pretty good chance that they are working on a new IP, and I hope that they are. But for some reason, just gut instinct, just a random feeling that's not based on anything other than that, I honestly feel like they're probably working on another franchise. The good news is I don't think it's Donkey Kong, even though their two Donkey Kong games are absolutely amazing. No one really wants them to make another Donkey Kong game. We all want something different. I'd like Donkey Kong to continue. I'd like someone to make a Donkey Kong game, but I don't want Retro to do it. I wonder if Retro is maybe making F-Zero. How crazy would that be if Retro was making F-Zero or Star Fox? I think that they are the perfect studio. With what they showed us they can do with the Metroid Prime games, they are the perfect studio to make an F-Zero or a Star Fox game. And I want to believe these series are coming. I want to believe that they're getting made and Nintendo is using the amazingly talented guys and girls who work at Retro to make another one of their franchises, and I think it could be Star Fox or F-Zero, because those are franchises that, I hate to say it this way, but, excuse me, I feel like they need the help. Star Fox Zero obviously didn't land the way we wanted it to. Even though I like the game, we know the reasons that's an issue. So Star Fox has been in limbo for a while. We haven't heard from F-Zero in a long time. F-Zero GX is amazing, but it only sold okay. And then I think they made like a Japanese only release Game Boy or DS game after that, and that's it. So I feel like if they wanted to bring those series back in spades and make it a big bombastic thing like, we have Star Fox, we have F-Zero, you throw the retro name onto it, it's going to be a big hit, and it's going to be an awesome game. So, you know, are they making a new IP? Maybe that certainly could be the case, and like I said, I want that. But I think we need to keep an eye out for them to come back on another older Nintendo IP. And the last question of the day on Twitter comes from a good friend of mine, a fellow podcaster on The Juice Is Loose, an awesome all-around dude who likes very good music, I must say, by the way. And that comes from my good buddy Retro Death. What is up, homie? Thank you so much for asking the question, and I wanted to give you the very last question of the day. So, Retro Death asks me, Anthem and Ashen look like masterpieces to me. What new IP at this year's E3 got you the most excited? I love this question because new IPs are always very, very exciting, and we don't get enough of them nowadays. You know, there's a lot to probably answer there, and I'm not going to lie. Anthem might be the most exciting to me. It actually really might be. You mentioned Anthem, so I can't really surprise anyone with that. I think Ashen looks fantastic. I love Dark Souls. It has a Dark Souls vibe. But Anthem looks really, really special to me. But, you know, the other new IPs that jump out to me, if we want to consider Mario plus Rabbids a new IP, which is kind of cheating because they're two previously established IPs, but, I mean, the game looks fantastic, so I'm excited for that. Starlink looks really cool, which was the game that Ubisoft showed using the the little spaceship toys attached to your controller. I'm very, very excited for that. And the other one that a lot of people have been talking about is The Last Night, that other indie game. Weird side-scrolling, kind of Blade Runner-esque looking shooter game with amazing visuals. The Last Night looks like something really, really special to me. So, I mean, honestly, those are the ones that jump out to me. Anthem, Starlink, and The Last Night all looked like awesome new IPs. There's probably another few that I'm just not really thinking of. But, I mean, those are the ones that really had me thinking, wow, we're seeing some really cool new stuff. And those are probably my favorite new IPs from the show. And that's it, guys. Another awesome, successful Q&A is a wrap. Thank you so much for being involved. And you guys ask me so many good questions every time I do this. It's a lot of fun. I try to pick a variety, even though I did a lot of Metroid games today, Metroid questions today. I'm sorry, you guys, but I just want to talk about Metroid. But I try to get a variety, and, you know, I get a lot of questions. I cannot answer everyone's. So like I said, I will remind you one more time, if you follow me on Twitter or Facebook, you will know when I ask for questions, and you can have a chance to jump on these. Facebook is great because you can ask me long-form questions, whereas Twitter limits you to 140 characters. But I definitely use and check Twitter a lot more often. I'm more active there for sure. So either way, this was great. You know, everything looks great for the gaming industry. All the consoles have great games coming up. Nintendo absolutely killed it. So excited for Metroid. And I think we're going to leave it at that for today. So, of course, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for asking me questions. And this is Rob of Rule of Two Review. I will catch you next time on another video.